What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Caster Gets Crafty, and today we're getting back to our dioramas with the story that I've been developing throughout this entire channel. Today we're doing a mountainside landscape, but on the other side of the mountain, at least on the inside, we're gonna go with a little cave. So I had some pre-cut foam boards already made, but I had to go ahead and just mark it up a little bit and just use my foam cutter to just cut out the inside. So once I've gone through all the layers, I decided to just make sure that the top fit perfectly right, and then I decided to just glue on all the layers just to make sure it was perfectly secure, since I was going to do the detailing with everything already glued together. So in order to start doing the detail on the rock face, I decided to use my foam cutter to just get rid of some of the volume so I can get into the details a lot later. This tool is probably one of my favorite tools. It's really satisfying just going through the foam. It's honestly super satisfying, and it really helps get most of the work done so that you can have the main body done before you start doing the detailing. Since the detailing is done in such a miniature scale compared to this, it really helps to make everything a lot faster. Once I get to those spots where I can't reach with my foam cutter, I decide to switch to my carving tool so I can just carve out that volume as best as possibly can. So once I've gotten my volume down to the best position I want it to be, I decided to go into the detailing as fast as possible, and I decided to start carving out the hole for the entrance of the cave into the mountain. Once I was satisfied with all the detailing I've done, I decided to glue on the top so I can move on to something else. But before I moved on, I figured I had to add another entrance on the top of the mountain just to make it a little bit more diverse with some of the figures that I was implementing. Once that was over, I was pretty much ready to start using my plaster and Mod Podge mix again onto the surface of my diorama. I mixed it to a very brushable consistency this time around. Honestly, so much easier to apply this way. Before I was actually struggling just a bit, since it was more of a paste, but this helps me get into those nooks and crannies inside the rock face of the diorama. Once that was all dry, I decided to move on to adding the texture in the form of pebbles, sand, gravel, and some flocking. I then sealed it with some isopropyl alcohol and some watered down white glue that I made. So now that the diorama has already dried off from the priming that I did outside, I decided to start painting. So for the method I used for painting the diorama this time around, I decided to water down the surface, as I saw in a few videos online, and it actually helped me move the paint around a lot better, and it actually looked like it stuck onto it a lot easier as well, especially since I was using acrylic paints for this instead of washes. So it was honestly very useful for that, especially on the inside of the cave. It made it look very, very natural. So once the first coat of paint dried, I decided to do the same thing. I added some more water onto the surface, and I added some dots of a different color, specifically raw sienna, and doing this helped me move the paint a little bit better in different locations, and it actually blended very, very well with the rock. So once that paint was dried, I did the same method again. I added some more water to water down the surface, and I painted on a different shade of brown, which helped it all blend and mesh all together. So while I set that aside to dry, I decided to move on to my figures and begin painting them. So for my figures, I decided to pick out some figures that represented some mercenaries that were hired by an archaeologist to find some artifacts inside an old abandoned tomb of an old pharaoh, to try to create better weapons and better technology, hopefully, in order to fend off these new threats that were caused from, believe it or not, the first video I made where a spaceship landed into the Wild West and caused a whole mayhem of all the animals and made it way harder for the people in the imaginary West to actually live there. So once I was done with the painting, I moved back to my diorama to finish off with a couple washes for the ground and the terrain on the bottom. And then I ended up moving on to creating some features that I wanted to add to the inside of the cave to make it more of an actual tomb or like a palace that they are trying to invade. And I did that by using clay, super sculpey, which I've used in my previous videos. I needed to create somewhat of a man-made stone base, so I just wrapped a piece of foam board that I had, XPS foam that I had laying around, and I created a small base for me to build this little tomb on, as well as started creating some pillars and adding the cracks in using my clay tools. Once I was done with most of the greeblies, I guess you can say, I decided to make the sarcophagus, which is where a pharaoh lies when they have perished or passed away. And it was a bit of a challenge since it was a very small scale. I'm not used to it and my eyes aren't that great, so seeing the small scale was very hard. So moving on to the other greeblies, I had to 3D print some of them since I couldn't get down to the very minute details that I couldn't get into. Once I had everything that I wanted to add to the cave done, I decided to just start painting them a sandstone color since they were, well, in my sense, imported from the original grounds. So I figured it'd be a nice touch and a nice change of color that could fit in with the inside of the cave. And I did try to sculpt some Anubis sculptures, but I could not get it to work, so I opted out for 3D printing. But I'm gonna work on the clay sculpting still off camera so I can do better on camera with the clay sculpting. But overall, the 3D prints came out very well, and I painted them a way Anubis would look. You know, an Anubis sculpture, if you've seen one, they have gold plating, bronze, gold plating, they have gold furnishings on the head. They are typically painted black. So I opted out for 3D printing and it came out pretty good. So the sculptures, I figured I'd add them in just because I would like for the sculptures to come alive and to be defending the sarcophagus, the old pharaoh that is lying in the sarcophagus, from the archaeologists and the mercenaries that are trying to get into and explore the palace, the old pharaoh's tomb. I figured it was a nice touch. And once I was done gluing everything into place, I decided to just move on to the glamour shots. Thanks again for tuning in for this video. Please hit that like and subscribe button, share this video if you will, and also go back and watch my previous videos so you can follow along with the story as I make more dioramas. Thank you and have a great day.